It was the kind of night where silence seemed heavier than usual. The house was wrapped in darkness, the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the only sound breaking the stillness. I was asleep in that deep, dreamless state where the real world doesn't exist for a while until the sound came at first. It was faint, like someone tapping on a wall somewhere far away. I stirred, not fully awake, not fully asleep. My mind tried to twist it into something harmless, a branch against a window, maybe the house settling. But then the sound shifted. It wasn't random, it was deliberate. Thud, thud, the noise jolted me upright in bed, my heart skipping like a faulty drum. I glanced at the clock on my nightstand. The green digits glowed. 3:02 a.m. That alone was wrong. No one visits at 3 a.m. No one should be outside our house at this hour. Then the voice came. Open up, HOA inspection. The words didn't register at first. My sleep-fogged brain tried to make sense of them. Homeowners Association inspection? At 3 in the morning? That made no sense. I blinked hard, trying to chase the haze from my mind. Hey, the pounding came again, harder this time, rattling the door on its hinges. Hey, open this door now. That voice, it wasn't polite, wasn't professional. It was loud, commanding, with a rough edge that made the hairs on my neck stand up. I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. Whoever was out there wasn't here for anything good. I swung my legs out of bed, the floor cold against my bare feet. The house seemed to be holding its breath. Every sound felt magnified, the creak of the floorboard under my heel, the faint ticking of the wall clock in the hallway, the slow drag of my breath. From the hallway, I caught a faint glow light spilling. In from the front porch through the glass panels beside the door, I moved slowly, keeping my steps quiet, my mind racing. HOA inspections happen during the day. They send letters. They don't show up unannounced in the dead of night, yelling and pounding like they're trying to wake the dead. As I reached the entryway, I pressed my back against the wall and peeked through the putt. The sight made my blood run cold. There was a man standing there, maybe mid-40s, wearing a dark windbreaker with HOA printed in large block letters across the chest. Something about it was off. The letters looked like they'd been ironed on crookedly, and the fabric had that shiny, cheap sheen of something you'd buy from a discount store, not an official uniform. On his chest hung a badge butt. It wasn't polished, wasn't even straight. It looked like something from a Halloween costume, thin and dull under the porch light. He had a baseball cap pulled low over his forehead, shadowing his eyes, but his mouth was visible, set in a tight, impatient frown. In one hand, he held a flashlight that he was occasionally shining at the windows, like he was trying to see inside. The other hand rested on the doorknob, and I could see his knuckles flex as he rattled it again. My instinct screamed, "This isn't!" Right? Everything about him, the uniform, the time, the way he carried himself, freaked of wrongness. "Sir, you need to open the door," he said. His voice a little too casual now, like he'd realized his earlier aggression wasn't working. Routine neighborhood check. We got reports of violations. Violations? At 3 in the morning? I didn't answer. My throat felt dry. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. My heart thudded in my ears so loudly I was sure he could hear. The man's tone shifted again, dropping the pretense. "I can make this a lot easier, or I can make it harder. Your choice." Before I could decide what to do, he stepped back and his body tensed. That's when it happened. The sound was deafening in the still night woods, splintering, metal straining. The door shuddered violently in its frame as he kicked it. The lock groaned, the deadbolt bending against the pressure. He kicked again, harder. This time the door frame cracked, and I could see a jagged line splintering through the paint. Every instinct told me to run, to grab my phone, to scream, but my feet felt rooted in place. This wasn't a knock anymore, this was an invasion. From upstairs I heard movement, soft creak, the kind that only comes from someone trying to walk quietly. My stomach dropped. Jake, my son's room, was directly above the front door. He definitely heard the pounding. He was 12, curious to a fault, always wanting to help when trouble was near. I prayed he'd stay put. I opened my mouth to call up to him, tell him to lock his door and stay in bed, but before I could, the man outside slammed into the door again. The third kick was the worst. The wood gave way with a sharp crack, the door swinging inward, an inch before the chain lock caught it. But the chain wasn't strong enough to hold forever. I could see the screws pulling loose from the frame. Through the gap, I caught a clearer glimpse of his face. His eyes were cold, almost bored, like breaking into homes was something he'd done before. The flashlight beam danced wildly across the walls behind me, and I realized he was scanning for valuables. For people, anything he could grab or control. Once he got inside, the chain rattled as he tugged at it, testing its strength. "Last chance," he said, his voice low now, almost like he was enjoying the game. In that moment, something primal kicked in. My mind raced through the house layout. Phone in the kitchen, keys on the counter, rifle in the gun cabinet in the den. But every option felt too far away, too slow. He was already halfway inside. I could hear Jake again upstairs, his footsteps quicker now, like he was moving with purpose. A knot of dread twisted in my chest. I didn't want him anywhere near this, but I also knew Jake wasn't the kind of kid who stayed on the sidelines when danger came knocking, literally. I glanced at the clock again on the wall. 3:06 a.m. Only 4 minutes had passed since I'd first woken up, but it felt like a lifetime. Another kick slammed into the door. The chain gave way this time, one of the screws snapping clean out of the wood. The door swung inward with a loud metallic clatter, slamming into the wall, and just like that, the man was inside. The porch light behind him framed his silhouette, casting a long shadow across the floor. He stepped forward slowly, his flashlight beam blinding me for a moment. My eyes adjusted just in time to see his other hand glove reach into his jacket pocket. I didn't know what he was going to pull out, and I didn't want to find out. In those few heartbeats, every sound in the house became sharper. The ticking clock, my own shallow breathing, the faint creak of the upstairs floor as Jake moved closer to the stairs, the man's boots on the hardwood. I backed away, hands up instinctively. My mind screamed at me to stall, to think of something, anything, to keep him from going further inside. But the man's focus was sharp, scanning every corner of the living room like he was cataloging what to take, what to ignore. And then somewhere deep inside the house, I heard it, the unmistakable metallic click of a rifle bolt being pulled back. I froze. The intruder froze. Jake was awake and armed. The man didn't notice at first where the sound came from, but I knew. My chest tightened as I realized what was about to happen, what could happen, and in that razor-thin moment between panic and action, the night took a turn none of us were ready for. The sound of that metallic click seemed to echo through the room, slicing right through the tension like a knife. My blood turned to ice. I didn't have to see where it came from to know Jake, my 12-year-old son, had just chambered around in the small hunting rifle we kept locked away. In the chaos of the night, I'd forgotten the simplest, most dangerous truth. Earlier that evening, I'd cleaned the rifle after weeks of storage. I'd meant to lock it back into the cabinet. But after dinner, I got distracted phone calls, dishes, bedtime routines, and instead of securing it, I'd left it leaning in the corner of the den, unloaded. Or at least it had been unloaded. Then, which meant one thing. Jake had not only gotten to it, he'd loaded it. The intruder didn't react right away. The beam of his flashlight still hovered over my face, forcing me to squint, but I could see him freeze ever so slightly. The sound of a gun being readied isn't something you mistake for anything else, especially if you've been in situations like this before. Who's there? His voice shifted, less arrogance now, more calculation. Before I could even think about answering, Jake's voice came from the shadowed hallway near the base of the stairs. It was smaller than usual, trembling at the edges, but it carried an unmistakable sharpness. "Stop right there." Hearing that command from my own son did something strange to emit, was pride and terror in the same heartbeat. I wanted to protect him, to tell him to put the gun down and run back upstairs, but I also knew that right now, in this exact moment, Jake might be the only reason the man wasn't already across the living room toward me. The flashlight beam jerked toward the sound of Jake's voice, catching just the edge of his frame. Jake was standing there barefoot in his pajamas. The rifle pressed tight into his shoulder the way I'd taught him during the last hunting trip. His stance was awkward. He was still a kid, but his grip was steady enough to make anyone think. Twice the man took one step forward, then stopped when Jake raised his voice again. I said, "Stop." It wasn't loud, but it was firm. The kind of firmness I'd heard from him when he was really determined to win an argument or defend himself at school. This time, though, it wasn't about winning. It was about surviving. I raised my hand, slightly toward Jake, trying to signal him to lower the rifle. "Jake, it's okay. Just no, Dad," he interrupted, eyes locked on the man. "It's in our house." Then he was gone. He bolted through the open doorway into the darkness beyond the porch. The sound of his boots pounding against the pavement faded quickly, swallowed by the night. For a moment, the only sound left was the sharp, shallow breathing mine, Jake's, the house itself. My legs felt unsteady. My hands still half raised, like I didn't know whether to chase him or collapse. Jake lowered the rifle slowly, his chest rising and falling in fast bursts. His face was pale, but his eyes were locked on the doorway as if he expected the man to come charging back any second. I moved toward him, my instinct to grab him, to pull him into my arms to make sure every inch of him was unhurt. But when I reached him, I didn't touch him right away. I just stood there for a beat, looking at my boy, this kid who still left socks on the floor and asked for help with math homework, now holding a weapon, having just fired it at another human being. "You okay?" I asked quietly, my voice sounding foreign even to me. Jake nodded once, but it wasn't the confident nod of a kid sure of himself. It was a quick, almost mechanical motion, like he hadn't fully processed what had happened yet. I had to," he said finally, his voice small. I swallowed hard. "I know." Sirens wailed faintly in the distance now, growing louder by the second. Somewhere between the shot and the man's escape, my survival instincts had kicked in enough to grab the phone and dial 911. My words had been quick. Clipped intruder in the house, shots fired, suspect fleeing. The dispatcher's voice had been calm, but the urgency was clear. "Stay inside. Officers are on the way." The blue and red lights washed over the walls within minutes, the tires of the squad cars crunching against the asphalt outside. I could hear the muffled thump of doors opening, the heavy steps of boots on our porch. A voice called out, announcing their presence before they crossed the threshold. I put a hand gently on Jake's shoulder. "It's over now," I said, though part of me didn't fully believe it, because the truth was, even with the police here, the image of that man's eyes, cold, calculating and promising this wasn't over, was burned into my mind. And the sound of that rifle crack, the way my son's hands had stayed steady when they shouldn't have, that would stay with me even longer. The night air outside was sharp when the police stepped in, the smell of damp pavement drifting in with them. Flashlights cut through the dimness of our living room, beams glancing over the shattered lamp, the splintered door frame, the trail of dark droplets leading toward the street. Officers moved with controlled urgency to heading straight out, into the neighborhood, scanning yards and alleys, while another stayed inside, eyes sweeping the room before settling on us. "Everyone okay here?" he asked, voice steady but alert. I nodded, though my heart still hadn't found its normal rhythm. "We're fine." "My son," I glanced at Jake, who was still standing with the rifle in his hands. "He's the one who fired." The officer's gaze shifted to Jake, and for a moment his expression softened just enough to look almost human under the harsh brim of his cap. "Son, you mind putting that down for me?" Jake hesitated, then handed the rifle to me without a word. Were cold when they brushed mine, his fingers a little stiff. I leaned the rifle against the wall. Far out of reach, another officer came in from outside, speaking in low tones to the one inside. "Blood trail goes about 20 feet, then stops. We've got a glove too. Probably ditched it while running. Any sign of a vehicle? Not yet. Could be on foot." They kept their voices just quiet enough that they weren't openly alarming us, but every word landed heavy in my ears. The man was hurt, but not down. That meant he could still be out there, somewhere close. maybe even watching. One officer, a broad man with tired eyes, motioned for me to step aside while he took down the details. I walked him through it, how I woke up to the pounding, how the man claimed to be from the HOA, how he kicked the door in. I told him about the fake uniform, the crooked badge, and the moment Jake stepped in. I didn't hide the part about the rifle. The officer's pen scratched over his notepad. When I finished, he tapped the paper with the pen's end. This matches a guy we've been trying to pin down for weeks. He's been working the area, hitting houses late at night, sometimes posing as a meter reader, sometimes a security guard. You're lucky you didn't have a partner. It's lucky the word. Didn't feel right in my mouth. The officer turned to Jake. You did good tonight. And you stayed calm, you gave a warning, and you stopped him from going any further. I've seen grown men lose their heads in situations like that. Jake didn't smile. He didn't say thank you. He just gave a small shrug, his eyes fixed on a spot on the floor. Another team came in to take photos of the broken chain, the cracked door frame, the dropped flashlight, the scatter of glass from the lamp, a crime scene in our own living room. They collected the glove, bagged the flashlight, and marked the small dark spots on the hardwood that I didn't want to look at too closely. When things slowed enough for me to sit down, I eased onto the couch and motioned for Jake to join me. He sat stiffly, his shoulders still slightly raised, like his body hadn't gotten the message that the danger was over. The officer from earlier crouched down so he was at Jake's eye level. You did what you had to do to protect your family. He said that man wasn't here for any good reason. He's going to the hospital whether he likes it or not, and we'll find him. Jake finally looked up, his voice low. Will he come back? The officer paused, weighing his words. What? Not if we can help it. And I promise you, we're going to make sure he knows this isn't the house to mess with. They asked if we had somewhere to stay for the night, but I shook my head. Leaving didn't feel right, even with the door busted and my nerves shot. This was our home. And I wasn't about to give that man the satisfaction of knowing he could chase us out of it after the police left. The silence returned, but it wasn't the same silence from before. This one was thick, heavy, alive with the echoes of what had just happened. I made Jake a cup of hot chocolate, not because he asked for it, but because it felt like something normal, something that belonged to a life without strangers breaking. And at 3 a.m., he drank it slowly, his eyes still distant. I didn't want to, but he was coming at you, he said finally, breaking the quiet. I know, Jake. I set my mug down and leaned forward, my elbows on my knees. You protected us. You did exactly what you should have. He didn't answer right away. Then, after a long pause, I thought my hands would shake, but they didn't. I thought I'd miss, but I didn't. There was no pride in his voice, just a kind of wonder, and maybe a little fear at what he was capable of when it mattered. I wanted to tell him it would be okay, that he wouldn't have to think about this again, but that would have been a lie. We both knew it. This moment would follow him in the quiet hours of the night, in the sudden loud noises that might come weeks from now, later. As I boarded up the door temporarily, I caught movement from the corner of my eye. Jake was at the window, looking out toward the street. The police cars were gone now, their flashing lights replaced by the faint orange glow of the street lamps. The neighborhood was still again, but I could tell his mind was still running. Think they'll catch him soon? He asked without turning around. Yeah, I said, even though I didn't know for sure. And if they don't tonight, they will. Guys like that, they always make mistakes. He finally stepped back from the window, but not before glancing one last time into the shadows. We both slept in the living room that night, if you could call it sleep. Every creak of the house made my heart jump. I could feel Jake stirring too, though neither of us spoke. The rifle stayed on the coffee table, unloaded now, but close enough to grab. I hated having it there, but after what happened, locking it away felt wrong, too. Morning came slow, the pale light creeping across the floor, revealing the damage in full. The splintered wood, the muddy footprints, the faint rusty stain on the entryway tilet, all felt too real in the daylight. I started the coffee and sat down across from Jake, was staring into his cereal without eating. You did something brave last night, I said quietly. Not many people, even grown-ups, could have done it. He looked up finally, his expression serious in a way I'd never seen before. "You told me to protect home and family, right?" I nodded. That's what I did. It wasn't defiant. It wasn't boastful. It was just a statement of fact, from a kid who'd been forced to grow up a little faster in the span of a few minutes. I reached across the table and put my hand over his. "Yeah, Jake. You did." Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed briefly before fading. Life outside our walls kept moving, but inside, I knew things had changed. Man was still out there, maybe hurt, maybe hiding, but whether or not. He came back didn't matter as much now, because that night, I realized something that would stay with me forever. Sometimes heroes don't wait until they're grown. Sometimes they're made in an instant, in the space between danger and action. In the moments when the people you love most need you to stand your ground, and my son Mai, 12-year-old boy had stood his ground.